Okay, so our project this week has to do with the techniques that we practice in our skill builder in our sketchbook. So you're going to choose one of those and you're going to draw your name in bubble letters or block letters. I'm going to show you kind of an easy, quick way of being able to do both of them, and they both start the same. So I'm gonna use my last name. You can use your first name. You can use your last name. As long as it's your name, it is fine. So here I am writing my name, Piscarich. They don't have to go in a straight line. It's kind of more interesting if they don't. And then what you do, and if you want to draw block letters, is you go around the letter that you wrote, and then you erase the original letter on the inside. And there's a block. The next one I will do as a bubble, and I do the same thing. I just make it a little rounder on the edges and erase the letter on the inside. I'm going to continue to do that for all of my letters as I go. I'm going to do block and bubble, but you can choose one or the other. You do not need both in your project. You can overlap them. See, right here at the end, my letters get kind of close together, so I start to overlap them. That's fine and actually probably pretty good for this project because we're going to use overlapping lines anyway. So feel free to overlap your letters if you choose. After you have your letters in block or bubble all the way across, then we're going to start dividing our paper. So we're going to do the same thing that we did in our skill builder by drawing lines and shapes all the way across our paper to divide it into smaller shapes. So we're just overlapping a bunch of lines. And I'm going to go through all my letters. I'm just dividing the space into smaller sections so that when I apply my value scale pattern, there are smaller, more palatable places to work with. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to go through and look for the teeny tiny little sections because remember, those small, teeny tiny sections are going to make your life difficult because you're going to have to apply a value scale in each one of these shapes that you've created with your overlapping lines. And so if they're too small, if they're really, really teeny tiny, it's going to be hard to go from dark to light within that shape. So it's a good idea to just go through and look for all the teeny tiny ones and erase a line and absorb it into a bigger shape. On the same side, you want to divide big spaces into smaller sections for the same reason. You don't want to have a really giant space that kind of wraps around other spaces. So as I'm going through and looking for the small sections to absorb, I'm also going to divide some of those larger spaces that I still have left with just a few little lines. You can erase the sides of your letters if you choose, but I wouldn't do it too often. This space wraps around that space in the center, and that's never a good idea to have one space around an entirely another space. So I divided that further, and I think this is looking pretty good. I've got a few more little sections here to erase and a couple more big spaces to divide further. And there is my divisions. And now I'm just going to do the same thing that we did in our scale builder. If I see some more spaces as I go that I feel like need to be adjusted, I can make those adjustments on the fly. But remember, we want to start in a corner. It doesn't matter which corner, but you do want to start in a corner because every space is going to determine what the next space looks like because we have our pattern, right? The darks can't touch darks and lights can't touch lights. You're choosing one of the techniques that we did in our Skill Builder sketchbook assignment. And I chose scumbling today. So I always start with a really light layer in the space, and then I just tighten it up and make it a little bit darker with some layers and making the lines a little bit closer together. So here I am starting. The next space I'm going to do is going to be this big one, and I'm starting with light, and then it's going to be dark over to the left because it cannot be light over there since it's touching a light space. Lights cannot touch lights and darks cannot touch darks. That is the pattern we are working with. So I'm always looking at the spaces that are touching the space that I'm working on in order to determine the value pattern of that gradient that I will be applying. So here's my next space. This one turns a little bit. See, it's dark at the top, and so it should be darker at the bottom here as I gradiate that darkness up there. So your job is to really look at the space and decide how your value scale fits in order to comply with that pattern. Sometimes our darks are going to be just a teeny tiny little bit like this space right there. And sometimes they're going to be, you're going to need to pull the darks out about halfway into the shape. I'm going to leave this shape like that, and I'm going to come back to it later because I might be able to finagle it to make it work a little better. So I'm going to go up here to this shape, add my darks on the right side. Remember, every space that you've created by overlapping your lines is now its own value scale. And so by doing this, you're going to essentially create this abstract piece. This is going to be dark up here at the corner where it's touching those two lights. And then it's pretty light, but that's like a really big light section. And you notice there's two lights down here touching. So I need to solve this problem. And the way I'm going to do that is by actually gradiating back to dark down here at the corner. So this section, this little space actually has two fades. It goes from dark to light and back to dark again. So that's my solution to an issue that may arise. You can have your spaces gradiate more than once, but I really would be hesitant to make them gradiate more than twice. Only because then you're gonna start like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and I think that tends to be a little bit confusing in our composition. Once you get to your letters, you're going to treat them just the same as the background. We're going to add our values within them, and they are going to essentially blend into the background.